Huh? We've been looking forward for a number of weeks now for the arrival of our guest today, Vince Donovan. Vince Donovan has been with us on campus here before and has blessed many of us with his own story and the ministry that he's been engaged in apostolic or evangelistic ministry. This has taken him around the world in many ways, but the primary thing that we want to hear from him this morning is something about his work in East Africa among the Masai. Having been there with the Holy Ghost Fathers as a missionary for a number of years, Vince Donovan finally decided that it was time to launch out into what was often described as the impossible task of trying to evangelize the Masai. And 17 years ago, in fact, this month, he wrote a letter to his bishop indicating what his plans were, and I'm going to read just briefly to you from a portion of that letter. Looking at these people around me, at these true pagans, I am suddenly weary of the discussions that have been going on for years in the mission circles of Europe and America as to the meaning of missionary work. Weary of the meetings and seminars devoted to missionary strategy. Now, don't get any ideas. Now he teaches those. But it's out of this experience. I suddenly feel the urgent need to cast aside all theories and discussions, all efforts at strategy, and simply go to these people and do the work among them for which I came to Africa. I would propose cutting myself off from the schools and the hospital as far as these people are concerned, as well as the socializing with them, and just go and talk to them about God and the Christian message. I know what most people say: it's impossible to preach the gospel directly to the Masai. They are the hardest of all pagans, the toughest of the tough. In all their hundreds of years of existence, they have never accepted anything from the outside. You cannot bring them the gospel without going through several preparatory preliminary stages. But I would like to try. I want to go to the Masai on daily safaris, unencumbered with the burden of selling them our school system, or begging for their children for our schools, or carrying their sick, or giving them medicine. Outside of this, I have no theory, no plan, no strategy, no gimmicks, no idea of what will come. I feel rather naked. I will begin as soon as possible. Sincerely, Vince Donovan. It's out of this journey and the experience of this work that we're going to hear this story, this morning, an amazing story of Christianity rediscovered in its basic form, being delivered to a people who did not know and had never really heard the story before. So would you welcome our guest speaker this morning, Father Vince Donovan.
Thank you, Dr. Crandall. Just listening to that letter brings back all kind of memories. It so startled the bishop that he closed down the diocese for a week and asked everybody to leave their mission posts and come to the center, which in that case was like 250 miles away, to discuss some question that's been brought up, questioning the whole work. It didn't happen to me overnight. I'm a slow learner, I think. When I first went to Africa, East Africa, I was sent to Kilimanjaro. It's a mountain on the equator, mountain of snow, and it's teeming with people, 500,000 people, and most of them are Christian. Very, very few Muslims there. Half are Catholic, half or Lutheran or Anglican. And I went there to learn Swahili. And I went to a mission compound. And that's the symbol that stands in my mind, against which I had to fight later on in my work. The mission compound was a set of buildings in a huge tract of land, manicured, beautiful land, with a big Gothic-like church and missionaries' residences, and a school, hospital, and other buildings. The other buildings are the things that interested me. That's where the catechumens came for instruction for baptism, a year's instruction every day. They came from what we called from behind the banana curtain. A ring of bananas around the mission compound, and behind it the people lived. They came out of their lives to that center there for instruction for a full year. And I was able to learn Swahili by popping in on their classes. And I got to know them. I got their names, and they had beautiful names. They were not Swahili names. They were Chaga names, the local tribal language of the country. Beautiful names like Elikana, Eliofo. El in the Chaga language is the same as in Hebrew. It means God. Don't ask me why. Same word. And so these were God with us, God walk with us. Beautiful, beautiful pagan names. And they wore what I thought Africans would be wearing, kind of toga-like things. And they went through a whole year of instruction. And I just happened to be there when the day of baptism came. And that's what shocked me. On the day of baptism, they took off these African clothes and put on Western clothes. They took European names, put aside their beautiful tribal names, and took names like James and John and Mary and Anna. And they went into a Gothic church and knelt down and prayed for the first time in Latin. And I was stunned by this. The unarticulated premise behind it was that here in the mission compound was security, salvation, holiness, grace. And outside beyond the banana curtain, there was nothing. There was only one thing for these people to do, to leave their life behind the banana curtain and come here to the center where salvation was. In doing so, they had to admit that their whole life, all their tribal traditions were worthless. They had to put them aside. There were some African clergy there, and I used to say to them as I was learning Swahili, I said, I envy you people so much because when I'm finished, I'll be able to preach in Swahili in the churches. You can do that already. You're going to be able to preach in your tribal language, Chaga. They said, what? We would never use that dirty pagan language in church. Their own language. This stuck with me as I was assigned to go somewhere else, and I told the people where I was going. I was going out to the Masai. The Masai were kind of an untouched people, fierce, living the same kind of life they lived in the 17th century, maybe beyond, far beyond that. And the people there and the missionaries on Kilimanjaro, who were all Christians, said, you can't go to the Masai. They're pagans. They won't be able to speak about God for 100 years. But I had to go. And the only method I knew was the method I saw there in Kilimanjaro. And I went among the Masai and I tried it. And 2 words are burned into my memory from their language. They are pastoral people, cattle people. And they have a word for everyone who's not a cattle person or a cowboy. A farmer. Somebody who dresses like this, who opens up the soil to the equatorial sun and turns it into desert. They have a word for farmer. They don't say the word, they spit it out. Oh, Mike. Barbarian. And that's what they said to me. The other word I learned was shomo, get out of here. Shomo, oh, Mike. And from village to village, as I tried to bring Christianity the only way I knew how, the only way I saw around me everywhere, I was just rejected. Well, I made my weary way back to headquarters some months later. And I was ready to tell the bishop and anyone else who wanted to listen that I did not think that Christianity was valid for these people. Once you come to that point, you think that Christianity is not valid for a people, one step behind it, you have to question whether it's valid for you. It was a crisis of faith of the deepest kind. I was going to leave Africa. The only thing that kept me there was the thought that maybe what these people were rejecting was not Christianity at all. Maybe they were rejecting our version of Christianity. I'd never heard of that phrase before. I studied in Europe and America. I never heard of our version of Christianity. And I was beginning to think that's exactly what they were rejecting. And not only that, even with our version, we couldn't give it to them straight. We had to have all kind of inducements to accept it. And that was all around me. Candy for children and presents for women and tobacco for men and education and medicine. I remembered the rice Christians of China. And I used to think that maybe we had a lot of petrol Christians of Africa. We used to flock around for the use of the car and for the advantage it would be to be near the mission compound. So I said, maybe, would we have the courage to go to these people without any props? No inducements, no rewards. Just the gospel by itself? I had never found that it had been done in that area. It's a strange thing to say. But it hadn't. And I said, I'm going to sit down if I can, with the help of anybody around, try to peel away from the Christianity I know, everything that's white and Western and European and American, and see if there's something left that I can take to these people with no inducements. Just take it to them, nothing else. No social works, no schools, no education, no medicine, no agricultural plans, no economic plans, no housing plans, nothing. And let the chips fall where they may. So I went back to them with much fear and trepidation. It was a vast area, 30,000 square miles. I had 10,000 to cover myself. And I went back and I picked out a village at random. I walked up to the people and I said, they were very polite. I counted on that. Nomads treat all strangers as sacred. Remember Abraham, when the strangers appeared outside his tent, he treated them as sacred. They were. I knew they would welcome me for food or for shelter or talking. So I just said, I want to talk about something very important. I said, all right. And they start sending for other people, representative people from the community. They didn't know what I was up to. They said, well, what do you want to talk about? I said, I want to talk about God. And the first response was, well, who can refuse to talk about God? These were the people that weren't going to be ready to talk about God for 100 years. They were ready to talk about God. But one old man said something to me. He said, you want to continue this or just once? I said, you continue. He says, well, let me ask you something, and let me tell you something. This is holy ground here. This is where we're born. This is where we work, where we graze cattle, where we marry, where we live, where we die. If we're going to talk about God, we want to talk about God here. He was saying, not in some mission compound. He was calling for a dramatic reversal of direction. He had no idea what he was calling for. Not to call people away from their lives to the center where salvation was, the mission compound, but to go right out into the midst of their lives. This is the sacred ground. We will talk about it here. It was my first lesson in learning what a community was like. A community does not move to dialogue about conversion. The community stays right where it is. The community does not move to worship. It worships right where it is. These crowds that were coming in Kilimanjaro were individuals coming from behind the banana curtain. They were not a community. They came from many communities. But these pagans said, if we're going to talk about God, we'll talk about God right here. And I said, we'll start tomorrow. I'd like to talk to the community, everybody. They said, women? I said, yes, women. Women were not allowed really to speak in their tribe in public. They weren't allowed to give their opinion in public about anything. But I said, no, women, everybody, warriors. The heart of the tribe were warriors. There's no word for teenager in their language, just warrior. I said, I'll come back tomorrow morning. I had all night to think about it. So I came back the next morning. They were all gathered. And I said, I do not want anything from you. I do not want any land. Because they had heard of missionaries, they never heard of missionaries that did not want land. I said, you are nomads, I will be a nomad. I'll live in a tent. I don't want your children for our schools. I had tried that before, and you would not believe how you get children for their schools. You need soldiers behind you with guns. And you have to walk into a village if you're looking for school children. You have to say, I want all the children to come up here and all those who can do this. Please stand over here. That's to reach the age of reason. They can reach over the top of their head and touch their ear. Most children will try to go around the back, but once they can go over the top, that's their age of reason. And you'd line them up and you'd take them away at gunpoint. Because they so fiercely resented the schools. So they were very happy. I said, no, I don't want any children for the schools. And we do have a mission hospital. Some doesn't know. I'm not going to ask for your people to go to the hospital. I don't want anything from you. I don't even want a place to stay. I don't want your food. You've seen me or heard of me. I'm not afraid of your food. I like your food. But I will bring my own food. I will rely on you for nothing. But I have something to tell you. I have nothing to give you. Nothing at all. I do not have any candy for your children. I don't have any beads for your women. I don't have any tobacco for your elders. I don't have any medicine for your sick. I took the medicine out of the car. I had become a kind of an amateur doctor, delivering babies, giving the most powerful drugs. I took it all out of my car. I had nothing. I have nothing for you. I ask nothing of you except the permission to go through your country, to stop and to speak with you. And that opened the doors. I said, let's talk about God. And I developed the system of letting them speak first and then I would answer. I had no plan to do this. It just worked out. But it was the thing to do, to let them speak first. You feel like you know so much, you've studied so long, they couldn't possibly know about God as much as you do. But you hold yourself back. You speak first, and then I will speak. I want to hear what you think about God. And I got some of the most original ideas about God. If I meet God, one man said, I'll put a spear right through him. He's killed my cattle. My wife is sick. Several of my children he's taken. Another one said, God loves the Masai more than other people. We can pray to God for victory in war because God will ensure our victory. God loves rich Masai and healthy Masai and good Masai. God hates poor Masai and sick Masai and bad Masai. One of the first ones who was sent to me by the community was to challenge me. And he was really the first one who told me what he thought about God. He stood there, looked at me in a challenging way, and here's what he says to me. There is only one God. And he waited to see my reaction. He thought I was going to be very surprised. Engai nabo ake, one God only, he said. I was a little surprised to hear him say it. Not with a thought, but that he'd said it. And I said, I believe that too. And he went, ah. Well, I found out in my years in Africa, out of the 1,000 tribes of Africa, there are only about 3 tribes that don't believe in that one God. Extraordinary. One of my presuppositions had to be wiped away. Where does this come from? Abraham? I don't know. When the whole human race turned to the one to search for the high God. 997 tribes in Africa believe in the one high God. So we talked about that God, and I said, well, I'll tell you what I believe about that God. But I can only tell them partly what I believe because I was so startled by what they told me about God that I couldn't say what I was going to say before. A God that loves my tribe more than other tribes? A God that we can pray for victory in war? I recognize that God. That's the God I worshipped. I had to tell them the story of Abraham, who was trapped God. His people had trapped God in the country of Abraham. They made God too small, and they made a small God, a tribal God out of God. And there was only one thing they could do, break away from this blood of theirs, this clan of theirs, this tribe of theirs, this race of theirs, where they had entrapped God, and go in search of the high God. And I told them about Abraham. And they were fascinated with that story. I said, Abraham was a great, great cattle person. He used to love to fill his eyes with cattle. He was a great shepherd. And they said to me, did your tribe ever find the high God, my tribe? I said, no. I realize now what we're doing is I've come here to ask you to join with me in the search for that high God. And let's talk about this God that loves rich people and hates poor people and hates bad people. They said, oh, yes. I could tell they were sending their best minds against me. Clear, uncluttered pagan minds. Tough to deal with. After I got into this, I'd be in a different village every day, sometimes scattered 50, 70 miles apart. And it was in the early part of the day when I set up this dialogue with the people. And I used to be terrified. There was a knot in my stomach in the morning. Because I realized I wasn't in a kind of a cozy intramural setting of discussion among Christians who believed a little differently than I did. This was Christianity against the world that did not believe at all. And I did not know which one would survive. I didn't know if the Christianity that I knew would be strong enough for this strong paganism. They said, do you remember that village you passed on the way here? One of them asked me. Well, that village is filled with evil people. And they start telling me the evil of those people. I said, never mind, I'll take your word for it. What are you trying to tell me? They said, well, God hates evil. God hates those people. You can't love evil. So we must be children of God. We must hate those people also. I said, well, I've come a long distance to talk to you about that God. The God who hates evil people? I don't think there is such a God. I think there's only the God that loves good people and evil people and loves me no matter how good or how evil I am. This is unheard of. And it's strange the way I could convince them. I could not convince them with logic. I could not convince them by referring to the book that I carried under my arm. They were illiterate people. I carried the Bible. For months and months, they wondered what the book was. They knew I was getting my material from that book, but I couldn't read to them. I could tell them the stories. But just these words. Doesn't God let the rain fall on the good and the bad? And his son? And then they said, yes. Now, I touched a raw nerve because the word in their language for rain is engai, and that's the word for God, engai. It's not that they think that God is the rain, but it's the most beautiful thing they can say about God. We might say Father or Creator or Shepherd, but to them, the rain was the most beautiful thing. The rain was their lifeline. And I said, does not the rain come down on the good and the evil? He said, yes, it does. So I said, that's the God I want to talk about. It really wasn't the God that I wanted to talk about when I went there. I had no idea that I'd end up talking about that God. The high God. And the God who loves good people as well as evil people. And loved me no matter how evil I was. That's an extraordinary thing to say to pagan people. But they listened, and we did dialogue on this thing for months and months and months. I was exhausted. And then we moved out. But just on God for months and months every week. And they would remember every single thing I said the week before. I didn't have to worry about reviewing. Illiterate people have an infinite memory. They think they're supposed to memorize everything they hear. The only Masai who lost their memory are the ones who went to school. Then they started relying on books. But these people believe that if you hear something and you understand it, you'll remember it. So I learned after a while, what did we talk about the last time? And they would tell me everything. I picked out some of the best teachers from this, right from among these pagan peoples. Right at the beginning, they began to help me. And we moved into other fields. Sin. Forgiveness of sin. Unheard of. There's no word for it in their language. Grace. Jesus. A man. Oh, they were interested in that. And then church, ministry, baptism, Every single thing I studied in the university and the seminary, I had to revise under the constant attack of these pagans. Not hostile attack necessarily, but just so foreign to the way I learned that I had to stop and think about it. Sometimes I'd have to say to them, that's a very good question. I will try to answer when I come back. I cannot answer it right now. I must think. Very difficult questions. But we went through every single thing that I studied in the seminary, and everything was revised. Today is not the same at all to me because of having dealt with these people. They revised it for me. And I can't explain when we finally finished. When I peeled away everything that was white and European and Western and American, I had a manageable message, which surprised me. If you had asked me when I first went there, what's this message you're going to pass on? How long would it take to pass it on? I would say, I guess about 4 postgraduate years. I didn't know. All of a sudden I found a message that was manageable, graspable, and passable. I didn't realize it. I could pass it on to them, they could understand it, and they could take it from there. And I came to the end. I said, that's all. I don't have any further, no other motivation. Not after your children or people in the hospital. That's what I came for. This message, you've heard it. We've discussed it for a year. Do you accept it? Do you believe in this Jesus? That's all I want to know. And will you sign that with baptism we talked about? It was that simple. But I said, now we've come to the end. I have something to say to you. I know you now. I didn't know you when I came. I know you, I didn't know their names, but I know their faces. And this group of people didn't attend all the meetings. They had other more important things. This group here didn't understand what we were talking about half the time. This one are not really willing to accept some of the real challenges in the message. And this group here, I don't think, believes enough. So we're going to separate the group. If you decide for baptism, when I come back next week, I will separate you. These will be baptized. These will not. These will. They say, wait, what are you doing? Why are you trying to break us up like this? They watched me for a while. Said, what are you doing? Of course there are stupid people in our community. But there are intelligent people too. And that's why God makes them intelligent, to help the stupid people. And there are cowards in the community. But we have brave people among the Masai. They will make us face these challenges. They will help those cowardly people. And there's some who do not believe perhaps enough, but there are others with very strong belief. And I'm speaking for everybody now, this man said, when I tell you that we have reached a point in our history, I can say to you, we believe. We believe. And once again, it was a strange sounding thing to me. I'd never heard of we believe. I believe, or you believe, or I do not believe, or he believes, but we? I said, I'll have to come back. I never heard that before. We believe. And I went away for a week. I had no telephone. I couldn't get in touch with anybody. I just had to roam around in my tent and think. I read the Bible as much as I could. I could find no other books. I had 2 rituals. One was a Catholic ritual for Catholic ceremonies. The other was a Lutheran one. And I went through them, baptism. And I found something very interesting. The first question in both rituals, and it's the same answer. It's for a child's baptism. Bringing the child to baptism, the minister or the priest says to the parents, what do you ask of the Church of God for this child? And the answer was, faith. In other words, the child cannot think, cannot believe. There cannot be a valid baptism without faith. What they're asking is the faith of the community to become the faith of the child so the baptism can be valid. And I went back to those people and I said, I'm a slow learner. I needed time to think. I see what you're saying. You say you believe. You will be baptized, all of you. My first contact with the communal idea, the communal approach to life and to Christianity. My background was completely individualistic. I was completely American. I'd never heard of such a thing. They taught me that. Years later, the Catholic Church accepted it. In our creed today, in our Catholic Church, we say, we believe in one God. We used to say, I credo, I believe. Now we say, we believe. They were right. If you would ask me about the faith in me right now, what kind of faith do I have? Where does it come from? It depends on so many people. I can see their faces. I know their names. And if one of them would lose faith, so would I. And if they were strengthened in faith, so would I be strengthened. There's only one way to accurately describe the faith that is in me right now. That is to say, we believe. They were right. I had no idea what a community was when I went to Africa. These pagans taught me. They taught me much more than that. But they did teach me that. And they taught me in this way what the church was. Because I thought of the church with a different kind of, functions, and most of the functions were situated behind the Roman collar. The power, the authority, the preaching, the teaching, the blessing, the praying. Here was a human community with all their kind of different functions. They had all kind of functions. For instance, when I get stuck, as I say, and I couldn't go any further, I didn't know how to go any further, one of them would say, wait, I will help you. And he'd step in and help me. What he was a teacher, a pagan teacher. He was often used in their feast days when they passed on their values and their history. He would come forth. He was a teacher, so he would help me. Then they had their preachers. On their feast days when they celebrated, they had to have people who would stir them. And he'd get the talking stick in his hand, and he could really stir their hearts up. He was a preacher, really, a pagan preacher. Then they had prophets, because nomadic people must make a decision to move or to die. And they have certain people that can lead them to do that, especially the women who are very reluctant to move. They can take old, familiar things, make them challenging and new, make them make a decision for life or for death. They're prophets, pagan prophets. And their prayers. The very first time when I said, we'll talk about God, we'll start right now, and they shamed me. They said, we're going to talk about God and you're not even going to pray. We're going to just start talking about God. I said, oh, excuse me, I didn't think pagans prayed. I didn't tell them that. I said, okay, just a minute. They said, no, not you. Not everyone has this gift of calling down the blessings of God, but we've got several people in this community that have that gift. That woman over there has it. And that woman said the prayer. And I got accustomed to it. I was the Christian messenger, but when we started our dialogue, the meeting was always opened up with a prayer by the pagan woman. And as the year went on, her prayer became more and more Christian. There was no doubt about who the prayer was in the community. Then there was somebody that held them all together. He held the community together, enabled the preacher to preach and the teacher to teach and the prophet to prophesy and the prayer to pray. And I knew what that person was. That person was going to be their minister, their priest. And it was going to happen on the day of baptism. Because on the day of baptism, that prayer would now say a Christian prayer. The preacher would preach a Christian sermon. The teacher would teach Christian teaching. The prophet would prophesy for Christ. And the one would hold them together and enable each one to do it. They would become church on the day of baptism. They taught me that. It's not the Catholic way of doing it. They said something else to me to show this clear pagan mind which was ahead of me. They used to say to me all the time, we understand what you're saying. That means that baptism is everything. I said, I didn't say baptism is everything. They keep saying, baptism is everything. Oh, baptism is everything. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, you don't have to give us baptism, but if you do, it's everything. And I thought, well, that's not in the missionary's mind. Baptism is really the first baby step. We're going to carry this out for about 100 years, and then it'll be ready. But baptism is just the first step. That's not the way they saw it, or they heard it, when I would tell them the stories from the New Testament. They said, well, here's what we mean. I said that there's a village over there that I pass, and they come to this meeting. You notice they come? But they're not going to be baptized because it wasn't their village. It's not their community. But I'd like to, get them, tell them. have to go someplace else now. I've already committed myself to another village, so I can't get back to them for about a year. So you people who are baptized, you can tell them, in a year I'll be back. They said, why do you have to come back? You gave us baptism. We will teach them. I said, these are real literate people. I said, all right, you teach them. I thought I could get out of it. I said, and I'll come and I'll judge when you're finished if they're ready for baptism. They said, you don't have to do that. We'll judge whether they're ready for baptism. You gave us baptism. I said, all right. You teach them, you judge whether they're ready, call me and I'll come and baptize them. And they said, you don't have to do that. And they did. They went through with it. I had visitors from my headquarters, of course, from Rome. After a couple of years it's investigating me. But this one man came out from the Holy Office, the most fearful department in the church, in the Catholic Church. And he stayed with me 2 weeks, but he used to roam around with a translator. And he'd come back to the tent at night, and he said to me, you know, today I went to a village not far from here with the translator, and we said that people are all Christians. And I said, you know the padre, the priest. He said, no, we don't know. Well, who instructed you? Who baptized you? The people from that village. He says, they're illiterate. They didn't even write their names down on the baptismal register. This is out of control. I said to him, yes, it is. It should have been out of control a long, long time ago. They also said to me, what does it mean that we're baptized? Whenever you come and visit us, now the villages now becoming baptized are getting more and more numerous, like 30 of them widely scattered after a couple of years. When you have time, we're going to have communion then. Is that it? The full ceremony? Or doesn't it mean, our baptism, that we become a people of the Eucharist, of communion? Once again, they're clear, uncluttered pagan minds. They were absolutely right. I had to say to them, you are right. I'll leave the decision up to you. However, I know that if you do this, that outside church will pull away from you. But whatever you do, I'll follow you. They decided they didn't want to do it at that time, that they would wait for this outsider like me to come and lead them, rather than stand the danger of breaking away, because to them, accepting the Christian message was already a breakthrough in their history. They knew what love was. They just didn't know that it went beyond the clan lines and the tribal lines. That's all I had to show them. They went through those lines. So now that they've gone through those lines, they don't want to retreat back behind those lines again. And that stopped them. But they were absolutely right. Their insight was very clear on all of these things. They did accept Christianity in great numbers. Village after village, community after community. You might say on their terms in a way, because they're nomads. They have no church buildings. They don't have all the accoutrements that we have with our church as nomads. They're free, they're mobile. I envy them. There's never people that I was so tempted to give something to, and I just held back. I gave them nothing. And they don't know. They don't know the secret, the dark secret of missionary work. That a church that comes into existence from that point on becomes subsidized by the church that's sent the missionaries. I never told them that. That's part of our version of Christianity that I did not pass on to them. So that on the day of baptism, they became completely independent. Financially, and in every other way. The one thing they're lacking is the acceptance of the outside church. Right before I left Africa for the last time, I went to my bishop again, who suffered much because of me. And I said, could we do this? Could we go to Rome and take a few of these people that are ready? He said, they're illiterate. I said, well, 1 or 2 of them are literate. But let them see them and have the interpreter. They can answer any question. They'd be amazed what these people know. And then you could go with me to this last group that I have, will baptize them and ordain them all. In other words, ordain the preachers as preachers and the teachers as teachers and the prophets as prophets, and the priests as priests, and the evangelists as evangelists. I used to read the words of St. Paul and see the description of these communities. And some are apostles, and some are prophets, and some are teachers, and some are evangelists, and some are healers, and some are officials, and some are administrators. Some speak in tongues. That's the only church they know. The only church these people know is a church on safari. That's not bad. Pilgrim people, nomadic people are never satisfied. They never settle down. They have a million questions and not many answers. That's these people. I noticed the people of Kilimanjaro were a settled down people. They have no more questions. They're satisfied. But the nomads are never satisfied. They never reach the end of the safari. So that's what they are. They're a pilgrim church, a church on safari, with no permanent buildings to hold them back. No baggage except the gospel, you might say. I think they're an authentic church. They're very, very different from ours. But I believe they're as authentic as anything that we have. We've allowed sort of one Western form to respond to the gospel. These coming out of the midst of their culture have responded in their own way. It was very interesting for me when I asked them, the first groups, what should we call you if you accept Christ? Would you believe they did not want to be called Christians? In their language, it would have been a beautiful word. It would have been translated, I guess, Il Cristo, the Christ people. It would have been very good, like Il Masai, the Masai people, the speakers of Ma. Il America, the Americans. Il Cristo, the Christ people. They said, no, we have seen Christians. May we Christians who dress this way, and you pagans who dress that way. We Christians of Kilimanjaro, whose houses are square, would you believe it? With tin roofs, you pagans whose houses are round with straw roofs. There's no such thing as a straight line in their African art. That's Western. Even our houses are Christian or non-Christian. So they said, we don't want to be that. What will you be? They came up with something from the depths of their culture. When they said it in the first place, I didn't believe them. And when I asked the question independently in other places, they came up with the same response. Their whole culture is built around the age group brotherhood. It's a painful initiation ceremony, terribly painful. They're not allowed to show they feel any pain during this thing. I almost fainted watching it. But it's a painful, voluntary initiation through a period of 7 years, and all the ones who go in that time become members of that age group brotherhood, and it gets a name. That name is never repeated. You can tell their history by the age group brotherhoods. So they said, we will be, if we're baptized, we will be the age group brotherhood of God, of Christ, of the end, the last one. Orporor is their word for age group brotherhood. Orporor lengai. We will be the age group brotherhood of God, of the end, the last one. The one not only goes this way through the clans and the tribes, but this way through the time. Why they like that so much is because it's at the heart of their culture. It shows the greatest respect for their culture and the greatest reverence for the deepest thing in their culture. We don't ridicule, we don't tell them to forget about it. This is the Holy Spirit been working on you. You've been prepared for the gospel and the church. Yes, you will become the church. You will become the Orporor Elengai. You will become the age group brotherhood of God on your baptism, with all the functions built in. I think that more than anything else will ensure that it will last the turmoil that they're going through right now. In Tanzania, for instance, and in Kenya, the political troubles, that they are the age group brotherhood of God. I've talked to government officials, black government officials, African government officials. Said, we were up in your area, and there was a war going on between the tribes. It was a Masai and some other tribe over cattle. So we got the soldiers in, and we called the leaders together. We tried to settle it, and we weren't getting anywhere until some elder said, it is not right to blot our spears on other human beings. And that kind of settled. He said that was a Masai. Christian Masai. I remember the time I gave them the Sermon on the Mount. I used to have it memorized in their language, and I would dramatize it, and they would sit there. These are people that I was warned about. Don't ever make fun of them. Don't laugh at them. Don't push them. They got a spear and a knife. They'll put it right through you. Don't do that to them. So I'd say to them, here's what Jesus said. If you'd like to hear now we talked about Jesus, here's the way he talked. Listen to how he talked. If someone slaps you on this side of the cheek, turn this way. You can hear them drawing their breath. If someone takes that beautiful red cloak from you, they had beautiful red robes. They were like the red legions of Rome. Give them the undercloak. They went. If somebody forces you to go from there, go there. Love your enemies. They just sat there stunned. Now, I didn't interpret anything. Now, when we often go through this, we'll say, well, yeah, if somebody slips you on one cheek, don't turn. You can take them to court, or you can defend yourself. Don't do that. Just play it. And those who have ears to hear, let them hear. And that's the way I ended it. That's the way they used to do with their riddles and their puzzles. It was up to you to figure it out. It wasn't up to the one who gave you the puzzle or the riddle or the parable. Just give them the word. Those who have ears to hear, let them hear. And I heard the first time I gave it, I could hear one old man, and everybody had the same reaction. See, they made him beautiful, but impossible. They could see the beauty of it, but the impossibility of it. These people who got their glory by never being defeated by anybody in history. They were held back by the guns of the white man when he came, but they were never defeated by anybody. And I remember once listening to them. I came one night and I went into the village and heard them talking. They would talk about this all week. They said, what makes the Masai great? We walk like lions through the plains. Everybody's afraid of us. And rightly so. They didn't take prisoners. And this man comes with this man, Jesus, and he wants to make sheep out of us. So they had to really, really decide what to do. Once they decided, their word was as good as gold. If they decided, fine. So some of those decided were the ones who spoke up and said, it is not right to blood our spears on other human beings. Christian Masai. I just wanted to convey as quickly as I could, not a theory, but a practice. If a theory arises, it comes out of the practice, it's not the other way around. I had to discard every theory I had and start all over. It's like going from not from theory to practice, but from practice to theory. Thank you, sir.
If some of you are interested in exploring this in more detail, Vince Donovan's book, Christianity Rediscovered, is usually available here in our Missions and Evangelism section of the bookstore, and if there aren't enough copies, I'm sure we can get some more. But we'll have opportunity through these next couple of days, today and tomorrow at least, to have some more contact with him. And if you're not in other classes, rest assured that we're doing some audio and video taping, so you may have a chance or be interested in listening or watching some of these things later. Well, after this morning, may we be the people of God. Go in that knowledge. Amen.